Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us back here at Lobe Sciences channel. We have a very special interview for you guys today. We're going to be diving into the news release of Lobe Sciences and Clearway Global enter into a development agreement to manage the global regulatory and development strategy and its implementation. Now, that is a mouthful. Here to make a lot of sense of that for us is Fred Sancilio, the CEO of Clearway Global. Fred, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Good, good. Now, before we dive into this, tell me a bit about Clearway Global, yourself as CEO, and like how you got there.
Yeah, Clearway Global has been around for a very long time. It's actually a consulting arm of a company that's been around for several years called Sancilio and Company, where we help pharmaceutical companies, small to medium-sized pharmaceutical companies, take products from the discovery stage through the approval with the FDA.
And from there, so then how did you get to meet them, the team at Lobe Sciences? What attracted you to them? And like, how are you guys actually going to be working together? Can you like demystify it a little bit?
Yeah, Lobe, and in particular, Phil, who's the CEO of Lobe Sciences, Phil Young, uh, worked with me actually in a prior company that he was CEO of. And I'm still working with that company, as a matter of fact. But Phil went on to Lobe Sciences to lead this group and brought me on board to look at the research, to evaluate the research, to determine whether or not the plan that the company had made sense, was feasible, and there was a potential for a blockbuster drug on the other end of it. I spent a couple of weeks reviewing the information, reviewing the science. I brought some of my team members in to help me do that. And the conclusion was, in fact, it was something that I should invest my time in. We do come into the company on a fee-for-service basis, but we also take an equity position in the companies. Mm-hmm. And so we're very careful, and we're very careful as to who we bring in and how we work with them going forward.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you have a horse in this race now, so to speak. You're willing to walk the walk here. You are now invested. So I guess what was the thing then that you saw here that said, okay, this is really promising, I'm going to do this?
Well, I had just come off another project, and I'm still actually working with that company too. And it's a disease that affects the brain, and we all know Alzheimer's disease. And I spent the last 40 years of my life doing drug development work and working with many different drugs that are currently on the market to treat neurological disorders. One group of drugs, which basically was outlawed from being used in research, were psychedelics. You say the word psychedelics and people kind of rear back and say, gee, that doesn't sound like something I want to be giving my loved one. But in fact, psychedelics are very interesting. And if you forget for a moment that these materials cause hallucinogenic effects, all right, they do very strange things to the brain. They effectively open the brain to reprogramming. This isn't something that's made up or pie in the sky. And actually, the brain that has been affected by these compounds, and there's a group of compounds that are similar, and they work very similarly to some of the other drugs that are out there that affect anxiety and affect depression, like Prozac. But they work in a very different way. Like I said, they open the brain to reprogramming, so that the brain can, in fact, change the way it thinks about trauma, change the way it thinks about anxiety. I got very interested in that, and the more I learned about it over the last 10 or 15 years, the more I found that sooner or later these materials would be investigated as drugs. And in fact, Lobe and a couple other companies out there are just getting into it. The problem with them is that they have like I said, a pretty bad reputation because they were illegal for many years, and that is being overcome by actually making molecular modifications to those drugs. So we're changing the way these drugs look. We're making new chemical entities so that these new chemical entities will not have the hallucinogenic effect that you see in the drugs that are abused. But at the same time, they have all the anti-anxiety effects and the anti-depression effects and the anti-trauma effects. At least we hope they will.
Yeah.
And may provide some very interesting drug candidates in the future.
Yeah, it is interesting. It really felt like the reason why they have this reputation is that first there was the giant counterculture movement, right? And then the big boot of the government came down and said, no more of that. And unfortunately, psychedelics being at the dead center of that argument were kind of caught deeply in the crossfire, despite, as you said, lots of studies have been shown that they show they have amazing medicinal effects, very low risk in terms of toxicity and stuff as well. So there's a lot of potential here. And I'm really glad to see kind of in a secondary renaissance of people paying attention to this in a much more coherent and professional way at this point. And there's definitely something going to come out of it. So it makes sense. And I agree with your judgment here. And I think Lobe Sciences is onto something good. So I guess from there, walk me through then what you're going to be doing to them, say over the next year or so. When can people expect to hear more, basically?
Well, the very first step, okay, is to select a compound. We've been very fortunate. I've got a very strong network. It's a global network of people who are scientists. Once we get involved with a company, we bring people in from all over the world, literally all over the world, ranging from folks from Asia to folks in Europe and in the United States. So when we get involved with a company, we bring in a group that I've worked with now for 30, 40 years. These are not young folks jumping into something new. There's a very, very structured way of getting the drug approved. But the very first thing is to make sure that whatever we select to go forward with, which in fact we have selected, it has to be a unique molecule. We've got to own it. All right, so that all of the money that's being spent on research then goes into this product. It can't be copied because of patents and the rest of the work that's being done on it. So we have a very strong patent effort going on right now. We have a very strong, really investigative effort. Once we decide that we move forward, it goes into animal studies, and in some cases, we have ways of bypassing some of the animal studies because this is related to products that have been in people for a long time. We may be able to bypass a little bit of that animal work, go directly into some phase 1 work in normal healthies first. All right, and that's typically called a phase 1 program. That phase 1 program will typically have just a handful of people because it's never been in man before. We're going to try to find the dose where we don't see any negative effects, but we get the positive effects. Once we arrive at that particular level, we'll go into multiple phase 1 studies, looking at the blood levels of that drug, looking to what type of manipulation we can make so those blood levels can be basically calculated based on oral doses that are going to be taken. And then eventually we'll go into patients, which will not be that far in the future. I suspect that there's been a lot done. Lobe has been a quiet little company, not telling very many people how much they're actually doing, but they're doing quite a bit, and we're doing a whole lot more. So I'm excited about it. I think we're going to have an interesting set of data coming out in a little while here, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I agree with you. I see a lot of potential here in this class of chemicals. I'm curious, last but not least, just as a bonus question, do you think we'll ever get a more societal acceptance of this on a clinical level? Do you think that's coming soon?
I think it's coming, in particular with the Lobe project. We're not going to be using commercial psychedelic compounds. These are new chemical entities that have a lot of the same structure and a lot of the same chemistry that you find in the psychedelics, except they won't be psychedelic. And so they, again, shouldn't be blemished by the past. But more importantly, we're making, you see, psychedelics as they exist today have been modified by nature, okay, to be absorbed in a certain way. And we're going to change those modifications so that they behave more like drugs and not like drugs of abuse.
Makes sense. All right, Fred. Well, listen, thank you for coming on. It was great meeting you. If anyone has any questions for Fred, don't be afraid to send them out to us. Might have him on for another video coming soon, assuming I didn't scare him off this time. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching. Any closing words before we go?
No, and I appreciate the time and to tell the story, and hopefully I've said it in a way that people can understand it.
Perfect. And once again, if anyone has questions, yeah, don't be afraid to ask. We'll happily engage with you. But for now, stay tuned for more coming soon. Fred, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.